Okay, first, so I want to make sure that everybody realizes that on the It and It remake video, I did not turn the comments off. They were automatically turned off when I uploaded. I have no idea why. Somebody pointed out a joke that I made that maybe was a little questionable, so maybe that had something to do with it, but if anybody knows how to turn on comments and make sure, I will never deliberately turn off comments. Unless somebody says something mean, of course. I mean, obviously, I'm gonna have to turn them off then. But speaking of, yeah, I was looking at the comments for my Shining video, and I absolutely loved them, so I have to go through this. You guys are dickheads, and half of you, we're gonna go through, I'm gonna pick which ones are gonna be banned from ever commenting again, but other than that, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was interesting, and all of you were wrong, but otherwise very thoughtful. And there was at least one that pretty much nailed it, but it was also very wrong in a lot of ways. So I just want to go through a few of these things. Again, this is on my Shining video. And as preamble, yeah, Stanley Kubrick has been one of my favorite directors for a very long time. I think the first one I watched was 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I wasn't on any drugs, but I started doing drugs after I watched it, because I was hoping it would offer some kind of special insight. And then by the time I got to Full Metal Jacket, there was something that I realized was missing in his filmmaking. Something fundamentally hollow about the way that he looks at his subjects and his people and the characters, and it didn't change one iota of how I thought of him as a director. He's still one of my favorite directors, and all of his movies are some of the most visually compelling things I've ever seen, but there isn't emotional or character movement or interest on behalf of the actual filmmaker or the film itself. And we'll go through some of these comments, because that was the point. The point is to celebrate you guys, so I don't need to keep talking. So Pila Pila 183 said, "I hate to be that guy, but I'll power through it. I think people who love this movie just haven't read the book. The story in the movie is a mere shell of the story in the book. They feel like actual people. We see Jack's hopes and dreams, how they got crushed and what that's doing to him mentally. We see why he got fired, how his drinking problem developed, his relationship with his parents. Wendy went from a strong character who could defend herself, she pretty much killed Jack, to a tear delivery device. Don't get me started on the end reveal and how it undermines the rest of the movie. It makes no sense and is only there for shock value. That said, I still watch this frequently. It's visually interesting, but that's it." So here's one of the perspectives. It's that the book actually had rich and defined characters, and so there was backstory, and so you can understand what they're going through and why this happens. There's a better treatment of the way that Jack goes through his process. And you would think that the things like that he got crushed, his dreams, and how they're depressed, and he's not going to get there, and he got fired, and a relationship with his parents being strained, all those things contributing to his mental breakdown, so it has more of a incisive psychological perspective than it does in the finished movie. So the commentators saying that those things were stripped out when it came to Kubrick's movie, and they were lost from the book. Now, I think I already mentioned when I did the original video that I am not a fan of Stephen King. I think it's mostly fast food writing, but I think that these are two sides of a similar coin. So I think that Kubrick would have had the more visual and, as one commentator will put it later, expressionistic take on this circumstance. So there's something else being tapped into that has to do with an intellectualizing of what's going on in these movies and just in the story in general, and that put into an artistic framework. So you have the visuals, and there's a feeling, there's a mood. Again, as another, I don't want to take from any of these commenters, but so later somebody will talk about how important mood is. But so you have that on the Kubrick side, and then on the Stephen King side, the writing side, then he actually made these characters, and he gave them backstories, and he gave them personalities. I don't think, if I went and read that book, I'm 100% certain that these would be some actually very superficial and cheaply written characters, but they are certainly going to be more well-defined than the ones that ended up in the movie. But there's some kind of a combination of those things which either could enhance both or nullify both. So there is a fine tightrope that everybody's walking when it comes to the way that this artistic storytelling is balanced. Because it's not necessarily wrong to have a disinterest in the particulars of the character. And it's not necessarily wrong to have only an interest in the particulars of the characters. But you can also do both of those things poorly because you didn't do the other thing well. So anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down onto this one because the next one is a doozy. It is from HS4974, which I think is biblical, right? That comes from the Bible somewhere. With respect, I think you should stick to Terminator 2 and Marvel films. I love Terminator 2, so not so much there are a couple Marvel films I love, but definitely Terminator 2. Like, it's one thing, I missed the apostrophe there, that's a conjunction, Jesus Christ. One thing if you need to be spoon-fed character background and motivation, and you can't use your own noggin to work out which parts might be analogies to something else, and which parts might be hinting at a deeper meaning. Also, there's literally endless amounts of theory and criticism around this very topic, and a quick 10-minute dig will give you tons of info about interpretation of, for example, The Maze. But to suggest that this isn't somehow your failing, but is completely the failing of arguably one of the most important and intelligent directors of the 20th century is mind-blowing. Like, imagine Stanley watching this and slapping his forehead and going, "Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs, I forgot to think about the characters. Boy, is my face red." I literally laughed out loud when I first read that. That's quality. Like, that's good writing. there was setup, there was pacing, there was character in it. Never gonna happen, buddy. There's loads of interesting characterization choices here that say all sorts about to use the word that you insist on repeating over and over, psychology of the film. There is tons about relationships to alcohol, relationships to spouses, child abuse, race relations, trauma, you name it. If you've seen this film multiple times and haven't been able to see any of that, that is 100% a you problem. That's not to say that Kubrick's characters aren't often detached and cold towards the audience. They definitely are. But that's a choice, not an oversight. It's like watching a Lynch movie and going, "Erg, that was shit. None of them can act. They were all so wooden." It's a stylistic choice, you Wally. So this is some foreigner. I've never been called a Wally before. And in my opinion, it adds loads of depth to the characters and story. It's not bad storytelling, it's a decision to tell a story in a particular way. Sorry if I come across aggressive, but honestly, you need to wind your neck in and adjust your tone. Maybe if something doesn't work for you, it's not the fault of, say, one of the most important directors of all time. Maybe you just don't get it, which of course is fine, and we all have our own tastes and opinions, but to put up this smug little retort to your audience of less than 600 subscribers, where you act like you've uncovered a major flaw in Kubrick's directing is not endearing. It makes you come across as kind of silly. And it's not a fucking pig man, it's a bear, you fucking fuck. I mean, yeah, like quality, right? You're definitely banned. You can never comment again. I would give it a thumbs up. But that's hilarious. So, and then a commenter adds, this is Wrestle Deep, which is vaguely erotic. I'm not sure what that name's about. I agree with you 100%. Glad that someone had to say it. Thumbs up. Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs. Lots of laughing faces and a heart. So my actual response to this is, I don't think you've seen my other videos. Projecting a frontier of complexity that isn't actually there doesn't rescue a film from itself. Yes, criticizing Kubrick for having little interest in psychology and emotion, directly or thematically, is like criticizing Kandinsky for not having more human figures in his paintings, but that doesn't mean that ignoring them makes a work of art better. In my estimation, Kubrick was more a painter and less a storyteller. That's fine. It's just less than what it could have been. Also, it's actually a dog in the book, you fucking fuck. I'm still calling it a pig. Alright, yeah, I'm funny too. So, yeah, I love this comment, obviously. If anybody in the future wants to comment on anything, because obviously this person's banned forever, but if anybody wants to comment in this vein, in this tone, and being so thoughtful but also disrespectful, yes, please, I will take more of that. But you might also get banned, so just make sure there are several in the wings ready to fill in that gap. So, yeah, I get that it's an aesthetic choice to play characters in a particular way for Kubrick, What I'm saying is that's a bad artistic choice. That's a bad aesthetic choice because he's losing out on so much that he could be doing otherwise. Now, this is also like saying, I mean, I use that Kandinsky reference, which is brilliant, but it's also like saying that there's something wrong with Impressionists because they don't have very detailed depictions of water lilies or something like that, or they don't have realistic looking water. But what I'm saying is that while in the painting medium, I actually enjoy Impressionism more than realism most of the time because I have terrible vision, so I don't want to have to bring glasses to be able to do it. But in this particular case, when it comes to film, I think that the better method of storytelling is to actually be interested and engage with the human psychology instead of leaving that aside because you're not interested in it. Obviously, those things can be depicted, and if you saw my reviews of things like Take Shelter or No Country for Old Men, or was it? No, it was There Will Be Blood. There are a few that I have on here where I specifically talk about the balanced way to handle thematics and ideas and philosophies and characters all in the same storytelling. I just don't think that Kubrick has an interest in these things, and I think that's why they're omitted. And one of the next commenters will pretty much nail it when it comes to Kubrick in general, and I think it's fantastic. But obviously this just made my day. This is hilarious. Awesome work. And this another commenter, Eric Gray, ZR2E. I hope that doesn't actually, like I'm supposed to read that in a particular way and it means something. I'm not sure, but I apologize if that's the case. The characters are props for Kubrick. He focuses on the medium, the film itself, the atmosphere, perspective, lighting, framing, sound, and most of all, mood, all capitals. And I reply facts, but that doesn't mean he would have been capable of doing otherwise if he wanted to. So yes, obviously mood and all of the technical aspects of his filmmaking are fantastic, and they fit a niche that we all kind of need. And something that is inspiring, especially to young men, I would say, of this particular era. But there still lingers this question of what that actually accomplishes, what it means, is it necessary? Is it something that is meaningful culturally when you just want to focus on the technical aspects like a photographer, which is of course his original vocation, and creating some mood on scene that people can sit through? Does it accomplish anything? Does it do anything? Does it mean anything? Does it matter in a larger scheme? Is it something that we should be doing as artists or as people who are imbibing this kind of thing? These are all legitimate questions to be asking of our artists. Now, historically, if dunder-headed people would respond that, well, art is somehow detached from the socio-cultural context, so it doesn't have to be doing anything. In reality, when you're doing anything, you're doing something. When you are creating something, you're trying to accomplish something, and it could be just relieving yourself of some kind of psychological malady, and this is the only way that you're able to do it. It could be trying to convince your fellow countrymen of some perspective that they haven't been aware of yet, or you could be just trying to make a paycheck. So that is a legitimate question to be asking of this art. So yes, I understand he's trying to create a mood, and he does that in masterful ways, but what is it really actually for? What is the point of that? So we have another one. This is from Alan Rubenstein, or Stein, 3696. I recently left this comment on another video with a much more detailed analysis of The Shining. I just watched it on the big screen a week ago, sorry. And it's clearer to me than ever that it's a subjective, expressionistic experience. As a standard linear narrative, it makes very little sense, down to the time of day and the character names. The intertitles throwing out days and hours don't relate to anything, the character's behavior seems out of sequence, the geography is twisted all to hell, elements are thrown in without setup or payoff. Either Stanley freaking Kubrick suddenly turned into a hack who can't organize a narrative, or it's all wrong on purpose. It's about how abuse and American imperialism fucks with the human mind, dislocating time, space, and cause and effect. Violence makes doors open themselves, and the decades crash together. It's a mangled, traumatized memory fever dream about the sheer terror of being trapped in complete isolation with a crazy person. I.e., that is to say, a woman married to an abuser, or a people whose land has been invaded by genocidal monsters. So I have seen this take before, and this was my response. I don't want to overly discredit it or anything. I think your description has more storytelling aesthetic merit than the movie. Recall it's based on a book by a whiny nerd gaslighting as a genre king. Sure, Kubrick could have extracted an expressionistic scene from the crude layer cake he was served, but there's a reason his movies fascinate but don't define or move eras. He's a cynical anthropologist pinning human wings to boards, not some avuncular figure trying to help us understand ourselves. So this is one of those cases, and like I loved how this was framed and how it was written. There are a lot of really interesting ideas in here. But yeah, this is one of those projections, I think, for sure, that it's easy to pick little things out of what's going on here and project some things onto it. But I really don't think that the movie or Kubrick himself cares at all about these ideas that you're plucking from it. There is some Native American iconography, there is an abusive husband, and a woman struggling against that, and that's pretty much all you need to paint whatever picture you want on top of the work of art that's already there. So rather than the lack of deliberate plotting or lack of character being a choice to carve out or render in this massive elements something that is more expressionistic, that he wants to, say, refine down the harsh edges so that it looks something more, or in this case, an expressionism. He wants to jut out some more harsh edges. Rather than that being a deliberate choice to try to make something that's more aesthetically meaningful, I think Kubrick just didn't have an interest in the plotting, in the structure, in the characters, and that's why it ended up the way that it did. And that's something that's consistent across his career, if you look at any of his movies. And the thing is that I know everybody else feels the same thing that I do when they watch Kubrick movies. I know that there's something in their brain and there's something emotionally or internally that they're latching onto, that they say that, okay, there is something hollow here, but it's an intellectual hollowness that I can't really put my finger on. But everybody tries to reconcile that fact in different ways, and I just think, obviously, that my understanding of it and my reading on what Kubrick is and what he does is a much more accurate one. Okay, so we've got this one from King Redbeard, 8383. Hard disagree with you on the main characters. This film doesn't hold your hand and tell you every little thing about the characters. That's part of what makes it so eerie. What happened to make Jack lose his job and move across the country? How bad is his alcohol problem? Is Tony another entity or a repressed personality? The list goes on and on. Think about The Sixth Sense. The final reveal is so satisfying because we can tell something is wrong all along, even if it's subconscious. But what if they had never revealed that? The movie would have been panned critically, as The Shining was, and people would be trying to answer the question of why the psychologist never talks to anyone but the kid, or what's the deal with him and his wife, etc. Doesn't that go against your point? That you're saying that if we hadn't been given the hand-holding at the end in The Sixth Sense, then we wouldn't have had the satisfying conclusion to the story. But in The Shining, the point is that you're saying that it wasn't hand-holding and you didn't know by the end, right? What's something irritating even to me now is that Kubrick never revealed whether there was an answer to all these mysteries, or if he was intentionally using a mode of storytelling that uses our innate human tendency to search for meaning. We see numbers and patterns and we naturally come up with reasons, but we can also see things that aren't there, like the cords for the television or the furniture that's in one shot and missing in the next. Finally, to address one thing about the characters, most of them are not what they seem. There's plenty of indication that Jack's not the family man that he tells everyone and himself that he is. Charlie doesn't share everything about Tony with his parents. Dick says he's not afraid of the hotel and there's nothing in room 237. It requires some effort on our part to see through these lies, and then we have to ask ourselves what else the movie is lying to us about. My response, I don't mind a lone walk, but not only do I think the movie doesn't tell you the answers, I don't think it much cares. I don't think it cares if Jack is a hypocrite, or characters lie, or violence erupts for some or no reason. From the perspective of the hotel or Kubrick the All-Seeing, people simply click in and out of place in an alluring grotesquerie. I have a way with words. Oh my god. Yeah, so I mean, the point is that I think people are reading into it the kinds of things that they feel about characters and emotions and what goes on with characters in these situations and what's important to them in a story. But I don't think Kubrick thought any of those things. I don't think he ever got to that point. So some other great shorter comments that I really appreciate, I'm going to go to, because I've one like bigger comment that I want to make sure that I address here. And this will be the last one that we really talk about. This is from AWS Vids. There's long been a lot of discussion as to just how much meaning in Kubrick's films was intentional, or people just reading their own ideas into abstract works of otherwise relatively shallow art that Kubrick just intended as the simple films they appear to be on the surface. He was surely considering and playing with a lot of ideas in his films, but to what level those ideas ever connected into some grand unifying theory or even any graspable point has always been debatable. Was he a genuine genius that's just above most of our heads, or does the emperor have no clothes? Good setup. This is written like an essay. I think it's some mix of both. I believe he had a lot more going on in his mind as to the subtext of the films that probably doesn't come across as much as he either thought or had at least hoped people would figure out. And maybe some have, but most of the theories about the genius or secret scandalous meaning behind a film like The Shining are probably a lot of overthinking and projection. When you listen to Kubrick talk about the movie, he doesn't sound like he's thinking about a lot of really deep and serious stuff. He just says he wants to give the audience a scare and play with creepy ideas and imagery, etc. And the ending result doesn't really have any intentional specific meaning. It's just like a Rorschach test for the audience. People ascribe a lot of meaning to the upside down door shot of Jack hovering over the camera, etc. Oh, this is such a unique and interesting shot. It must be really meaningful. The upside down nature of it representing the inverse nature of reality. Him towering over the camera is representing the authoritarianism of the patriarchy and the white supremacist oppression of the Native Americans, because there's a lot of Native inspired production design in the movie, and Jack says, "white man's burden." In reality, you watch the behind the scenes and it shows Kubrick coming up with that shot on the fly because he was bored with normal camera angles and he didn't think too deeply about it. He just lied down on the floor with his viewfinder and said, "Oh, this looks good." The production design was probably just an aesthetic choice because it fit with the hotel style and its location. He probably didn't think that deeply about it. Jack Nicholson just improvised the white man's burden line. As far as Jack going crazy and how deep the psychology of it goes, it does seem the same, and Kubrick was pretty much just thinking about it on the basic level of Hotel getting to him, possessed by the spirit of his dead previous life, and that's about it. It's not him representing Kubrick's guilt and madness over having faked the moon landing. It's not white man's guilt about the Native Americans. It's not some deep and spiritual commentary or Satanist symbology or whatever else people want to theorize about it. It's just a movie about a guy getting possessed and unleashing his worst self while isolated at a hotel, which is the basic story that Kubrick found creepy from the book and sought to simplify it as much as possible for a streamlined yet abstractly creepy horror movie. And that's as deep as it went in Kubrick's mind. He just left the rest of it as blank as possible while focusing on striking visuals that inspire feeling in the audience, and then just lets the rest of it be a Rorschach test. Which is interesting and cool, but it's not necessarily as highly genius as a lot of people make Kubrick out to be. He was a smart guy, for sure, and very talented at filmmaking, but as a storyteller, I think it was more about the messy musings of scattered ideas that vaguely fit a certain theme than he was genius theories or hidden messages. 2001 is just the bare bones, simplified arc of human evolution that it appears to be. No deeper meaning than that. A Clockwork Orange is just a relatively simple adaptation of the book, made cinematically striking with Kubrick's visuals and McDowell's performance. What depth there is to it comes mostly from the book in terms of what makes it through Kubrick's simplifying progress intact. And the rest is, again, a Rorschach test. He spends a lot of screen time doing things like just having Alex hit his friend in the balls in slow motion. There's no deeper meaning to this. It's just that Kubrick wanted to do a cool slow motion shot, and the hitting in the balls was funny. There wasn't some grand plan to making Doctor Strangelove a comedy. It was originally a serious drama, and Kubrick, almost on a whim, thought, what if we made it funny? The whole nuclear arms race is a big bad joke anyway. That's it. Full Metal Jacket, just a basic war turns men into monsters story, and not much more. He just has an unconventional structure to it, probably because he wasn't concerned with story structure at all. He just wanted feeling. Eyes Wide Shut is just a creepy musing about a popular conspiracy theory of hidden sex cults. No, it wasn't. Or he just knew about Epstein. That's pretty funny. But no, it wasn't, actually. This was the first time in Kubrick's storytelling that he actually tried to mine somebody's ideas. I agree with most everything that's said here, except Eyes Wide Shut was different. That's what was so fascinating about it, is that Eyes Wide Shut actually, it turned the aspects of Kubrick's interest in character, interest in not character, into an interest in character by externalizing it. So the whole point of Eyes Wide Shut is that the central character, who has everything. He's a really good-looking, wealthy doctor. He's got those beautiful women at the beginning who are chasing him down and acting overly flirty and doing some weird hip motions that always threw me off a little bit. But they're flirting like crazy with him, and it's just like, oh my gosh, this guy lives an incredible life. He's got a gorgeous wife at the time. He's needed, and you know, they have to enlist him to help at the party because he's so important. So he has all of these things, but the thing that happens is that they get home, and there's a little comment that he makes, and it throws his wife into this thing where she reveals this story about how there was this one guy, this naval officer, that she had this fantasy about. They never did anything. She never saw him again. There was nothing between them, but she had this fantasy. And the whole point is that this is like a virus that destroys the character, the main character, for the rest. There's nothing that he can do about it, no matter what he does. He tries to get a vengeful sex romp with a bunch of different characters throughout the movie. They all go horribly wrong because it doesn't matter. Psychologically, the whole point is that the thing, the injury, the bad thing that happened was that his wife even had that fantasy, and there's nothing that he can do about it. So psychologically, it's just exploring that through the rest of the movie. It's not actually about just the sex cults, but the other movies, generally, that is what's going on. You know, the Full Metal Jacket, that was the one that when I watched that, I thought that was really cool. There were a lot of cool things that happened in that movie, but what is the point? Is it really just war is bad? Is that all that we're going with? And what are the characters? Are these meaningful characters? Does it matter? Just war is bad and makes you crazy sometimes? And A Clockwork Orange, similarly, it had the dystopian aspects that looked really cool. It had that milk bar that was really weird. It had Malcolm McDowell, who's doing an excellent job. And it had the weird mind control stuff that happened at the end, but does it really mean anything more than what it's depicting? Like I said, it's just Eyes Wide Shut is the one exception. I think that he was finally getting somewhere where he was interested in that, where the mechanisms of the storytelling that he used before finally got overwhelmed by the emotional and character interests of the things that were going on screen too. So it's really sad that we didn't get more movies from him, because I think he would have finally gone a direction of having an interest in characters and psychology that would have buttressed and augmented everything that he had done up to that point. So anyway, the rest of this comment, and wanted to do a film about a couple struggling with their sex life, and that's deep as it goes. No, it goes deeper than that. So his films aren't necessarily stories, they're just musings on a collection of vague ideas, and he really just seems to use as an excuse to do interesting visual shots and scenes that he likes for almost purely aesthetic reasons. For instance, he seemed to love just doing long shots of following characters walking through corridors as the camera follows behind or in front in a symmetrical centered frame. For whatever reason, he just liked the aesthetic of it, so he did it a lot to fill time and do something he liked visually in a visual medium. That's as deep as it goes. And then finally, he was interested in some big ideas and was clever enough to make striking and entertaining visual films with some good acting in them, but he wasn't some deep hidden meaning style genius that only people with 180 IQ can truly understand. His filmmaking was just so striking visually and so unconventional, and abstractly dealt with some big ideas, that it inspires people to want there to be more intended meaning to it than there actually is. There has to be some deep meaning to how striking the visuals feel, but there might not be. Though it is fun to theorize about stuff and meaning together of your own accord, that's part of what good art can be. I wouldn't say there's any harm to it, but occasionally it's grounding to remember that even a supposed great untouchable genius like Kubrick may have just been as confused yet curious and are shallow as the rest of us. And that's okay. The films are still great for what they are. Visual works of art that inspire interesting ideas and powerful feelings in the audience. That's all a good movie needs to be. Bam! I mean, yeah, that's gorgeous. That's talk that you can give in front of a film class. I really enjoyed it. And this is what people need to do, even when they're wrong, even when they put forth just nonsensical ideas or haven't thought about it. You know, just be thoughtful. Just think about things. Just really consider them. Don't break everything into a binary of where I have to have this knee-jerk reaction because it's all Jets and Sharks, or I guess more aptly, it's all Mets and Yankees. it's all Kendrick and Drake. I mean, that's not really fair. I mean, that was pretty one-sided, but it's not always good. It's almost never good to put things into those terms. Really actually think about these things and figure out where the complexities are and try to understand them and be able to articulate them so that you can think through them properly, instead of going directly to that knee-jerk, oh, well, they said something bad that I like and think is good, so therefore, or they said something good that I think is bad, so therefore. It's much more complex than that. So obviously, yeah, the last commenter, not banned at all. You have a free pass, you can comment on all the videos. There were a couple of commenters that are banned forever and ever. Yeah, that one that was hilarious, you're banned forever, and the person who agreed with them, totally banned. If you gave a well, except for me, if you gave a thumbs up to that, then you're also banned. I'm gonna find you and ban you. But other than that, yeah, a great discussion. I appreciate it. It was great going through these comments and seeing people actually trying to be thoughtful about this stuff instead of the dumbass Marvel conversations that have been going on in more recent history. So I appreciate it. I hope all is well. And yeah, that's going to be about it for this video, but more coming soon. Please subscribe. Yeah, please help me, because I got routed and criticized pretty harshly here. Is it less than 600 subscribers? They hit me pretty hard with that one. So just try to get me above 600 so that won't apply anymore. I would really appreciate it. But again, see you on the next one. Bye.